Greetings, friends and fellow aliens. My name is David. Welcome to my channel, and thank you for tuning in to this video. It has been a hot minute since I have done an actual video on creativity and writing, and I thought this would be the perfect time to talk about a little bit of the INFJ stuff and have a discussion about some of the questions that I received about writing and being an author and about the book and all those kinds of things, and really creativity in general. So if you're an INFJ, you're a creative type and an introverted feeler type, please stick around because I'm going to cover a lot of these things and give you some of my personal experiences dealing with some of the things that I've had to deal with as far as being an INFJ and trying to produce an actual novel. This video is sponsored by my book because I am my own marketing department and all of those things. This is what it's like, the life of a self-published author. You gotta promote. So here's my book. It's called The Caretaker. It's got 350 pages-ish. It's a supernatural fiction story, so it kind of technically falls into speculative fiction. And right now, available on Amazon and on Kindle. And I'll have a link to a video that I'll pop up there, or is it up there? I'm not really sure which way this is facing. But anyway, a video link is going to pop up all about the signed copies and what I'm offering as far as a package, giving you a chance to actually own part of my original rough draft manuscript for this book. So please check that out. I would appreciate it. And like I said, the link is in the description. You can buy the book, review the book, and all those things. It is a great way to support this channel, and I appreciate you. Onward. So being an INFJ and trying to put together a large work that takes a great deal of time to actually put together has its own unique set of challenges. And most of it is just that detail-oriented stuff. We're great with the big picture, but a lot of times INFJs, we have the messy desks, we have the messy room, we have the messy nightstand, we have the messy things. I am certainly very guilty of all that because my brain's kind of scattered when it comes to the details, but as far as that big picture and knowing where I want to land, I'm okay with that. So it's difficult when you're doing something like putting together a larger artistic work or something that you can't just produce in a couple hours time where you can just dedicate the day to it and off you go, but something that requires habitual progress on it and setting aside a time to work on it or what have you. Man, that can be difficult. I think the first thing to remember as an artist or as a creative type is to understand that your process is not the same process as everybody else out there. And you shouldn't try to copy someone else's process. I've heard it 1,000 times. People say, if you're going to be a writer, you need to be reading at least a book a week. I don't do that. If you're going to be a writer, you're going to write a book, then you have to sit down and put down words every single day. I definitely don't do that. If you're going to be a writer, then you have to have your own quiet space to do this. That I don't do that either. Basically, I don't do anything that these people out here are telling you that you have to do. Otherwise, you're not an author. I am proof, people, that you can progress your own way and you can have your own path to accomplishing something that works for you and that's comfortable with you. Sure, maybe there's some frustrations involved, but your way of doing things is the right way. And I think we fall into this trap where we tend to get down on ourselves and say that we can't do something because we're not doing it like somebody else is doing it. And that's a terrible, terrible state of mind to put yourself in. So one of the questions I received when I posted on Instagram and I said, hey, I'm doing a writing video on some creativity stuff. Give me your questions. One of them from my friend Jer was, how do you revisit an old idea or an old project that you were working on? So this is one that I definitely felt as far as a question, because I have a whole graveyard of unfinished projects and things that I've worked on or written or tried to art or whatever, and just couldn't get to the finish line on them. And it is hard to pick something like that back up. I think it's different, obviously, for somebody who is doing an artistic work of some kind where you're painting, sketching, drawing, or something like that, even digital art. You can save that and you can come back to it. but a lot of times the inspiration isn't really there, or it's not the same. So for me, I had something that I was working on that I was about 30,000 words into. And when I wanted to get back into writing that particular story, which remains unpublished, and it's actually just kind of like a humorous zombie novel, with, again, a lead character who's just a really wishy-washy INFJ, just to throw him in the most uncomfortable circumstances imaginable, which I was having a lot of fun with while I was writing it. But to come back to that, the way I went about it was just sort of dipping my toes back in the water. And I went back and I wrote a little bit more to the story, but before I did that, I picked out a couple of the characters and decided to just write a scene or two with them. Has nothing to do with the story or anywhere within that story, probably wouldn't even plug it into the story, but just to have a little bit of fun. 500-600 words, some dialogue, some banter back and forth, and before I knew it, I was snapped right back into the headspace of those characters. You'd be surprised. Everybody uses that phrase like riding a bike, right? But it is kind of like that. And I was able to just sort of jump right back in. And I think when you're revisiting an idea that you've been working on, and you might be frustrated and it might seem huge and just intimidating now and all those different things, is to basically step back and break off a piece. Think of it as a giant cookie, right? And you can't have you can't just shove the whole giant cookie in your face at the same time. I mean, you could try, but like that's just kind of gross too. But you break some pieces off and take some bites and go that way until you're used to eating the cookie, and then you just want to have the whole cookie. Look, it's not the best metaphor, okay? But you understand where I'm going with it. Bite-sized pieces, a little bit at a time, and before you know it, you're just kind of back in the swing of things. Thank you, Jer, for that question, by the way. Second question I received from AJ, which was, are you working on a second book? Yes, of course I am. The Caretaker is book 1 of a planned 4-book series. Book 2 is going to be a little bit larger. It's got more in it. I'm throwing a lot out there. There are some things that I'm very, very excited about to write and get down in that. Currently, I'm at about a little over 4,000 words into the story. So it is still in its infancy. I've got a lot of it sketched out and outlined for where I want to go. But for me, I like to have a rough idea and then fill in the details. And if the story takes a turn in a way I didn't expect, that's not so bad as long as it's a good way. That happened a lot with this book, honestly. There were a lot of spots and places in it where I thought the story was going to go one way, and it didn't. And as a result, I actually have some lost chapters and things like that. I have different concepts that I wrote, and just kind of put the chapters aside. One of the ones that I really wanted to get in there was a chapter about responsibility as a concept. And it was good. I felt really good about it, and I felt like my imagery was really on point with it, where William ended up and who he was meeting and just the environment and everything about it. It just had a really good mood to it. But turns out, as soon as I tried to place it in the book, I'm like, man, this doesn't really fit. And so what I ended up doing was taking that and leaving that chapter aside, and I may use parts of it later. But that chapter got switched out for William's journey to self. And chapter 21 in this book is the one that everybody talks about and everybody says they get choked up over and gives them some tears. So I am not mad about the change in direction. You just kind of have to be fluid that way. But yes, AJ, I'm working on book 2 called The Steward. It is very exciting. I'm really, really looking forward to getting this one down the whole way, and I'm trying to be very, very careful about how I structure this story to lead into book 3 and book 4. So thank you. Another question I received from somebody who said they wanted to be anonymous was, what if people don't like your idea? Look, hitting on the INFJ thing, right? You have to understand that you can't please everybody. And you're going to do some things, and you're going to write some things or create some things in a way that not everybody will be pleased with, will not resonate with everybody, and that is totally 100% okay. It's your story. It's your path. And do it and stay true to yourself, and it will resonate with the right people. What's wrong with that? Not every idea is a brilliant idea, and not every idea is a winner. I had this idea to create a day camp for kids with ADHD. but apparently people were offended at the fact that I wanted to call it a concentration camp for kids. Okay, so when I say it out loud, maybe it sounds slightly offensive. My apologies. When I approach people about it, and I'm like, well, you don't have to call it the concentration camp for kids. You can just call it by its acronym. But apparently, people have a hard time with that too. Who doesn't want to send their kids to a camp with a cool camp t-shirt? Okay, so I'm just messing around with you with this idea. But my point is, sometimes you can have bad ideas, and they are legitimately bad ideas. But you, if you've got something coming from your heart, and it is your idea and you believe in it, just like me with the story that I wrote, then you go with that. And yeah, I've got 1-star reviews on Amazon. You know, I've got a couple of them, 2 or 3 or 4 1-star reviews. None of them actually reviewed the book. They just mark it 1 star and leave, which is fine. You have to understand and realize that those kinds of things are going to happen. You're not going to resonate with everybody. People aren't going to like you, and it is totally, totally okay. This is your path. And the people that you are affecting, those are the ones that you take care of. Those are the ones that are really important. Thank you, Anonymous, for letting me throw out a bunch of jokes about cock. Another question I had was the difficulty in getting over writing natural dialogue. How many of you have sat there and looked at a text that you were about to send and wrote it and rewrote it and deleted it, maybe didn't send it, maybe did, maybe saved the text to send it later, wanted to edit the text more, so on and so forth? Why did you do those things? Think about it. What were you doing in your own head that caused all of that to happen? No, the reason is because you want it to sound the best way you want it to sound. You want it to communicate in the best way you could possibly communicate. Do the same thing with your dialogue. I don't think I have the greatest dialogue ever when I'm writing, right? I think my strength is probably in visualization and descriptions and things like that. But I do try to tighten up my dialogue a whole lot after I'm done writing. I try to condense it. I try to make it more impactful. I try to make it more in line with what I need to accomplish in the chapter and in the story. So one of the ways to do that is to read it out loud. If you read it out loud and something comes out a little weird or it sounds just slightly off, that's where you need the tweak. It's not more complicated than that. You just have to kind of pay attention to it. And another thing is, go out into the world when you're walking around and listen to other people's conversations. Not in a creepy way, right? Don't have your ear against the bathroom wall when you know there's a couple people in there talking. But just wherever you are, if you're at a coffee shop somewhere, if you're in a mall somewhere, you're walking around in a shopping market or whatever, listen to what the conversations are like and start to understand that this is the natural way people speak. And also know that when you're writing, you can't exactly write exactly the way people speak. So you'll have to embellish a little bit. You'll have to tweak it a little bit just to make it... It's not very exciting listening to dialogue in a supermarket. So there is a whole acting part of this going on. And I think if you look at your characters as actors and as performing that role and that their dialogue fills in with that, you're going to be on point. On that topic, Ryan had asked about the details, filling in details as an INFJ in a story that you're writing. And this one is kind of tricky because we do have those broad general ideas. So we can get down, it's like a sculpture, right? You can start to chisel away at it and it'll take a certain kind of form, but it's not a detailed sculpture until you really start to get into there and get into those little spaces and start making it exactly how you want it to be. So when you're writing a story, filling in the details later is really important. I try to put in as much as I can as I'm writing it, as it's fresh in my head and the story's coming out and little things like that. And also take some notes and I put the notes inside of what I'm writing. So a lot of times I'll have a separate document or a separate sheet that's just a list of things that I want to go back to, change, embellish, or what have you. Maybe I go back through that when I'm editing or rereading it, just to write some of those things down so I can approach them later. But as far as details go, for this book, for instance, I was about 6 to 7 chapters in, and at that point I started to go back, went back to the first chapter and started filling in little details and things that I wanted to put in there that I knew would be playing out later on in the story. There was a point where I was on, now there's 32 chapters in the book, I was on chapter 28, 29, 30, and I was going back to chapter 1 and filling in 1 or 2 different words that I knew would have an impact later in the story and that I would reference in chapters 27, 28, 29, etc. So you understand that even though you're writing something out, you don't have to write it in a linear fashion. I wrote chapters out of sequence when I had to. I filled in details out of sequence. I went back and moved things around and changed things up when I wasn't even finished with the book because I knew that those things would play a part. So don't sweat the details too much and just try to keep those things in mind. And if you have that good idea, have some way to write it down. Put it on a note on your phone. If you're having that idea at 2 o'clock in the morning, I've done that numerous times. Have a notebook handy if it's what you're used to working in. For me, I did everything in this app called Ulysses, and love Ulysses. And anytime I was in there, I had a separate sheet within that program where I just put my ideas and ideas for changes. And that helped me fill in a lot of the details. So much so that if you read this book twice, I guarantee you will pick up things on that second read through that you completely blew past the first time around. And those little subtleties were very, very intentional. I wanted people to be able to go back into the book and say, I can't believe I didn't see this coming, because look at all the details that were sprinkled in. To me, that's just kind of fun. It's a little nod and a wink to your readers that you've been paying attention and that you're trying really hard to give them a little bit of breadcrumbs, right? Like a little breadcrumb trail for their intuition. I knew that a bunch of INFJs would be reading this book, and I knew that maybe tossing some nods out to your intuition would be a fun way to get you to go through it. Next one, Jessica asked, how did you come up with the characters for your book? Okay, so the main character in the story is William St. Denis. William appears as somebody in his late 20s, though probably appears even older than that because he's a little grizzled and a little scarred and generally unkempt. Now, for him, I wanted to make sure that I was striking out at a character that had some issues, that had lost his way, that was feeling like this little bit of nihilism almost, like, why is he even in this world? Why does he have to do this? He has this grand responsibility that you find out about in the first couple chapters of the book, and doesn't really take it as seriously as he should. So he was the first character that I had created because this story came from a writing prompt, and I wanted him to be that person. What would he be like? What would he be like to have this ultimate responsibility to be aligned with death herself in the universe, right? And as just a person on Earth, and having an unnaturally long life. So he can't really keep relationships, keep friends. He could know somebody as a child and he can watch them grow up and pass on as an old person. And what would that really do to somebody's psyche? And so I really wanted to put William right inside of that place. Now the trick was, for me, creating side characters and other characters that I could put in there that would challenge him. So the way I went about this is I had William's psyche really locked down as far as what I wanted it to look like. What I needed were characters that I could put against that. Think of it like if you have a white wall with a white picture on it and it's got a white frame. It all kind of blends in, right? That picture in that frame is William. So those other characters to me were the accents on the wall. So coloring that wall a different color will make that character stand out. Likewise, creating a character that is an absolute foil to William, or that really challenges him in a bunch of ways, was my best way of highlighting all of William's failings and his journey, and allowing myself the reverse as well. So William's nature challenged other characters too. And it was important for me to structure it that way. It's the way I was comfortable coming up with the characters. So really all of them serve a purpose to highlight traits and psychological concepts within each other and try to get them to work in sort of an integrated way. And that creates all sorts of room for conflict, which is the meat of a story. So I really feel like that was the most fun part of trying to come up with other characters. I'm having a blast with it in book 2, like a blast. So thank you, Jessica, for that question. That's a really good one. 2 more questions to go. My buddy Irene asked, how did I come up with the idea for a curio? So if you've read the book, you know what a curio is. Remember, reality can be a bitch sometimes. And if you haven't read the book yet, I would encourage you to do so. There's lots of good stuff in here. But a curio is essentially an object imbued with a certain type of power. So if you take, for instance, something like death, okay, and death exists as an abstract concept, but if you could take some object like a baseball bat and imbue it with death incarnate, what would that baseball bat be like? Essentially, in the world that I've created, that bat is what's called a curio, which is a little trinket or a little item or some kind of an object that has a particular power added to it. And for me, I put those in the story essentially as plot devices, and ways to get around some of the trickier things that I would have to do in order to highlight William's journey. One of which was skipping into the idea of like a parallel universe and a parallel reality. And there's no way for you to dive into a parallel reality. I had to create that for the world. It just so happened that it dovetails perfectly with the kind of world building that I had to do. So that's how I came up with the idea. The first curio I wrote about was, I'm pretty sure, the reality curio. And what better way to create a reality curio than to create it as a maddeningly difficult little puzzle that is like kind of frustrating. And so there's all sorts of ways to go about it, and you're going to see many more of those kinds of things in the coming books as well. The last question was from a girl, Jacqueline. And I mean, obviously, she and I are talking all the time, but she asked, and this is a good question to share with all of you, who is my favorite character to write in the book? Now look, there's a bunch of them in here, right? I mean, there's chapters where I just introduce a character and they're in one chapter. There are some that come back in a couple of different ones. There are ones that are a main through line throughout the whole thing. I've got villains. I've got people who maybe you think are good or aren't or whatever. So there's a lot going on. And each one of them in their own way was a joy to write. Obviously, perspective. Having perspective in the book was pretty awesome for me. But I'd say that overall, if I had to pick one of the characters that I enjoyed writing the most, or that when I sat down and I knew I had to write his scene, I was really, really excited, it was Duncan. I don't think it's that much of a mystery. I think if you know me at all, you'd probably know that I would have a great time writing a character who's kind of a pain in the ass to my main character. Duncan and William are opposites in so many ways. William is a feeler, Duncan is a thinker. William is very intuitive, Duncan is very sensing. They're both kind of inwardly drawn in a way, but Duncan is a performer. Duncan as a character is a stage magician. So he's a magician working in Atlantic City and doing magic shows, you know. So think of it as similar to like a Penn and Teller or like a David Blaine or like a, what's his name? The guy who pulls people apart on park benches. Chris Angel, whoever, right? One of those kinds of performers. And Duncan's character, he's very much so wants to shake people and wake them up to say, look at all the gifts you have. This is the natural order of things, and this is how everything works, and we can't really deviate from it. Duncan doesn't like cheaters. He doesn't like people who skirt the rules. He doesn't like people who are trying to do things to benefit themselves for their own gain, so on and so forth, that would so much so that it would throw out balance and harm the balance of other things. Think of Duncan as an ISTJ that is very, very concerned with the world working the way it's supposed to work. And somebody like William, who comes along and doesn't really care all that much, or has kind of given up on it and is sort of checked out and is just really frustrated by his role in the world, that's a huge challenge for him, because Duncan is very irritated with William when the two of them first meet and they start off. There's a lot of tension between those two for good reason, because William doesn't trust him. Duncan can't tolerate William. He irritates the hell out of him. So having that dynamic to play with was an absolute blast for me. I couldn't wait to put Duncan's words on the page. And I'm even more excited about his role and Elise's role in the second book, because Elise also was that joy to write for the same reason. She challenged William in ways that the other characters really couldn't. She was really whip smart about it. He couldn't get out of his lies with her. And I think it was really important to highlight that. And she is probably the most important character in the book because she helped William find his care for people again. And so that dynamic was a lot of fun. I'll be exploring it even more in book 2. In all, this kind of stuff is a blast for me. I love talking about writing. I love talking about the book. When you have questions about it, it makes me really, really happy as an author because it means that you're engaged with it. And I definitely, truly, truly appreciate it. 2 days ago, I hit over 100 reviews on the book on Amazon. It's got 5 stars. I'm really happy with it. And I never thought I'd honestly get to that point. And it's sort of surreal that it is. So for those of you who have read it, who engage with me on it, who ask questions about it, or just want to say hi and say that you really liked a certain chapter or what have you, I can't tell you how much I truly appreciate you, because this is something that was very much so from my heart, and it's really nice to see it resonating with other people. So thank you so, so much. I hope there was something in this video that you could take out of it and apply to your own creative endeavors. Just remember, I think the main thing about all this is that your path is yours. You know how you work, you know how you are creatively. Don't deviate from that. Don't look to your left, don't look to your right. Don't look at what other people are doing. Don't look at their success and feel knocked down about it. And also, don't look at somebody who's struggling and just trying to make their way as an artist and say that you are beyond that point. Everybody can use a little bit of encouragement from time to time, and I think it's really important as artists and as creators that we stick together like that. So thank you. I appreciate you all. I definitely appreciate all the questions. More writing content will be coming your way, as well as more INFJ stuff, obviously, and I will be seeing you very, very soon.